Hello, everybody. On behalf of myself and Dr. Jeremy Safran of the New School, I want to welcome you to Arts in Mind. I'm Joshua Wolf-Schenk. I'm the curator of the series. I apologize for the heat. Get comfy, and let's get a little passionate tonight, people. Let's take advantage. The occasion for tonight's event is a terrific new book by an author adept at burrowing into subcultures and finding the secrets and the struggle and the dignity and the humor there. Richard Gere is an acclaimed writer on music and culture and the author most recently of I Only Read It for the Cartoons, The New Yorker's Most Brilliantly Twisted Artists. We do have books for sale yes, bring it on. We do have books for sale in the lobby, and Richard and Ed will be glad to sign for you afterwards. And as a very special guest tonight, we have Edward Coren, who both needs no introduction and also needs an introduction that would just take up the whole event. And that's what we're going to do tonight, 75 to 100 minutes, either that or no introduction at all. Arts in Mind is about what the creative arts can teach us about psychology and the human mind, and also about how a psychological perspective can illuminate the creative arts in a fresh and compelling way. We've been running this series for many years and have done a number of really stellar programs. But if Ed is willing, I want to rename the whole series tonight after tonight's event. We deal with it by talking about it. Exactly what we want to do. We want to deal with it, and we want to talk. The format tonight is conversation between Richard and Ed, and Dr. Safran and I will lead off the questions, playing Phil Donahue and Oprah. We haven't settled who's going to be who, but we'll ask a few questions, and then we'll bring the mic around to you. Thanks so much to the students in the graduate program in psychology at the New School who made this event possible. Iran Barzilai, Sam Bodian, Lily Swistle, and Madeline Miller-Batom. And please give a very warm welcome to Richard Gere and Edward Coren. Yes. No, we have two. There's one. And there's one. Yeah.
Great. Thanks.
Yeah.
Hey there. Hi. Where should I start? Should I start with Ed or should I start with me?
I'm going to start with you.
Okay, this will be really quick. About 3 or 4 years ago, a friend asked me to do something for his magazine, his online magazine, the Comics Journal, a really great online magazine if you're into comics. And he'd just become editor. It was my friend Dan Nadell, and he said, "What do you want to do for us?" So it took me like 2 seconds, and I said, "Oh, New Yorker magazine cartoonists." He goes, "Yeah, that's great." So I started interviewing cartoonists and doing extended Q&As with them. And after I'd done 3 or 4, it became obvious that there was a lot of great stories there, and even more obvious that there was a book there. So I put together a book about it. And in the process, I met Ed. And he was one of the most fun people to talk to. I went up to Vermont, and where he lives, and I'm just going to say really quickly a few data points about Ed here. That he was born in Manhattan in 1935. Don't do the math, or unless you want to. He graduated from Columbia University in 1957. He's lived in Brookfield, Vermont, full time since 1987 or so, right? And he sold his first New Yorker cartoon in 1962, and has sold something like more than 1,100 by now. Is that close to 1,100? That's a lot of cartoons. The first time I met, I don't have my, here. Thanks. The first time I met Ed up in his home, we were talking for like 30 seconds, and I heard this noise, and I said, God, what's that weird noise? He goes, oh, it's my squawk box. I'm a volunteer fireman. We have to go to a fire. And we went to a fire.
It wasn't a fire, really.
He put on it's called turnout gear. That's the term of art, turnout gear. And we went out, and Ed helped put out a small but not insignificant SUV fire on the Thruway.
It would have been a national disaster if it had gone on.
You've worked on those too, right?
Yeah.
So I thought I'd start by asking you, how did you end up studying art at Columbia? You originally went to Columbia with a different career path in mind, right?
Yeah, dentistry was the career path, and it wasn't chosen by me, needless to say, but by my parents. My father was a dentist, and he had hoped I would become one and follow in his footsteps and fingertips, but I didn't. So I didn't study art per se, because at those days, art, the study of studio art was not encouraged at all in a liberal arts setting. So I studied art history mostly, and other allied liberal arts courses.
And you worked on the school.
The humor magazine, yeah, which is where I really started all of the subsequent stuff that's happened since.
It was called The Jester, which is perhaps a little too on the nose, even for a humor magazine.
Well,
Oh, okay. Can everybody hear us? Hold you. No, you can't. Okay. Louder? I got one thumbs up. Oh, no. Okay. You were at Columbia. You had an aversion to medical school, apparently. And when you graduated, you moved to Paris to study with Mr. How's it pronounced?
Hayter. Stanley William Hayter. S.W. Hayter.
At Atelier 17 in Paris.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a graphic arts workshop, and I learned about it from a professor at Columbia. I'd never heard of him, but it shaped my life. In truth.
Uh-huh. So, what made you become a cartoonist instead of a so-called fine artist?
Being an outsider, I guess, and having a propensity to make people laugh, to somehow ameliorate my other sensibilities. I don't know. I mean, I just was drawn to it by the comic strips that my father brought home every evening, and then maybe an occasional look at the New Yorker and the Saturday Evening Post, and I was drawn to it. It seemed to beckon me.
There was never an aha moment when you said,
no, not really. I mean, I think it was in retrospect. I mean, my friend Jules Pfeiffer wrote a book in which about his own career, which he called "Backing into Forward," and he talks about pretty much the same process of backing into one's life's work without intention, with thinking maybe there are other things you want to do, but somehow they get gleaned a bit by bit, and sooner or later you're stuck with something you really love to do, in spite of all its drawbacks.
how long did it take you to sell your first drawing to the New Yorker?
100 years, maybe. It felt like 100 years. Yeah. It was over and over again of trying and rejection, and it was really a kind of article of life of faith almost that might happen.
And here
the
is your the first one.
Yeah, I'm surprised it evokes laughter because it's a very dated indeed. It was at the very beginning of one's sensibility or your achievements or your loyalties worn full bore on your chest. Never before had this phenomenon existed. And all of a sudden, bit by bit, sweatshirts, T-shirts became literary. And I thought that was pretty funny. It was not widespread. And now it would be of no great consequence.
What I notice is, although the guy is not exactly recognizable as a Corin character, the line definitely is, and that was there from the beginning. But we can talk about that a little later. I want to get to, although I do want to get to the line. I think the most obvious, the most notable thing about your work, I think most people would say, is the viscerality of the bodies in it, of the masses of these large furry humans and furry animals and non-furry humans, non-furry. Oh, wait! Before we go, here's something. This is your.
Yeah, it's not focused. Yeah.
Oh. Okay, we can move on, or we can try and focus it. Is there a secret to focusing?
Is that what is it? I think
I
I detect a little laxity in your flossing.
Your father was a dentist. You spent a lot of time hanging out in his office.
I did. I mean, I admired what he did tremendously, and I was sort of sorry I could not sit through a pre-medical society film on a thyroid operation. That was it. And, that was the end of dentistry. But I really admired dentists. Mechanics and their sculptors and their engineers and their artists. I mean, it's a terrific form of hand and mind work.
Yeah.
So I took up a different form of that.
Well, I think that viscerality just comes through in your work very clearly. But even more than teeth, I think you told me that you started out drawing large teeth, but the teeth receded over the years, or was it the gums that receded?
Well, they became periodontal. It's true.
Jumping around a little bit, this is
It's a recent
piece.
Yeah, it's not a cartoon, needless to say.
But it's a little dangerous.
It's a kind of portrait of my inner soul, I guess.
By the way, if you don't know this already, Ed has a show on view at the Louise Ross Gallery in Chelsea, where there's works like this along with cartoons as well, so you can get the whole scope of your thing. It's called Bugs and Bicycles.
Bugs. What is it? Bugs and bikes. Bikes and bugs. Yeah, because there's some bicycle stuff in there.
And there is one. What's the deal with the bikes?
I love bikes. I mean,
Bikes are beautiful.
I'm an ardent lover of cycles, and it's like many others, like Arthur Conan Doyle was, and H.G. Wells and Einstein. I mean,
Flann O'Brien, the third policeman.
Yeah, and David, was it not David Lynch?
And David Lynch?
No, not David Lynch. David Byrne.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
Thank you. More bugs?
Yeah, I mean, bicycle is, I love it. I cycle a lot, and I consider it a body part, this machine. Unlike anything, any other, machine one uses. You're part of it. There's a give and take with it that is much more intense than with some four-wheeled beast.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And why bugs? Is that something to do with Vermont in the summer?
No, I like bugs.
You do?
I mean, I think it's kind of funny to have, insects propelling themselves around instead of their wings on a bicycle. It's just locomotion, a form of locomotion that I find amusing.
Fran Lebowitz said something snarky about bikers in New York a few days ago that I read. She said, "Why do they all wear helmets? It's not like they're astronauts."
Well, these could they could be bike messengers. Yeah. How are her scores?
Um,
Well, that's the same.
yes,
one.
this is the same one. But here we have one of your famous beasts in a dental chair, about to get a cleaning, I guess.
Well, that's the laxity and flossing. It's the
Yeah.
same.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I know. Sometimes you draw people.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you draw beasts. Sometimes the beasts act like people.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the people act like beasts. How do you decide which is going to be which in any particular drawing?
Well, it's a kind of instinct, I guess. It's hard to describe. I mean, it's either funny one way or the other, and I find it very hard to delve into that decision about why I feel that way. But I mean, sometimes things without beasts could be banal. I mean, if that was just a human with normally, it wouldn't work. I mean, it would be of no consequence. But by changing the transformation, by transforming it into some really nutty, daffy, unexpected context, it does work. At least it did for me, and so that's sort of the way I judge it. I mean, it's all instinctive and not a decision per se.
Okay. There are no real outlines in your drawings.
Yeah,
Just many, many, many tiny lines.
yeah, but there's still form and volume. And
Indeed,
still-
there is.
still work.
Yeah. But I think I asked you about that the first time I asked you about that. You said it has something to do with your fear of commitment.
Fear of commitment and indecision. It's true, but it's by now become a habit of the hand and eye. I just feel, that if it's a big solid line, it's not me. I mean, this hand would object to a very austere kind of drawing, but it softens it. It gives them light. It kind of makes the body language a bit more vocal. Put it that way.
When you sent me a batch of cartoons once to use at another time, and you sent it to me, and
I
this
I don't
was
know,
on
can
my
you-
refrigerator for
Yeah,
so
can-
long.
Can you read the caption? Question: are the captions legible back there? Yes. Okay. Sometimes it's useful to read them. It's sort of like a poetry reading. You could read them yourself perfectly well, but to have the creator there.
Exactly, it gives it that much more.
Yeah. I do think your problems are serious, Richard. They're just not very interesting. That's the poetic version of it. I do think your problems are serious, Richard. They're just not very interesting.
I can't tell you how many people have said that to me.
Wow, your blood pressure is impressive.
That animal is impressive.
But yeah, I mean that wouldn't work if that were just somebody, some normally daffy human. But somehow, when you think about the pressure in those arterial, the coronary life of this giant beast, it's sort of like a huge pressure system.
Right, but it's also something that a doctor could very easily say to a human patient as well. So
And it's
like,
true, we all want to hear that too when we have our pressure taken. Hey, this is the quiet trail. This actually happened right in.
Oh, so this is like autobiographical.
It is very autobiographical.
Do tell.
Yeah, I mean, because I was skiing one day in some Nordic ski area, and some guy came zooming by on his cell phone, voluminously shouting into this thing about a business deal, in the middle of the woods. It was pristine and lovely, and he was, and I wanted to say that to him, but I didn't. But I got back. The forecast for today is grumpy. That's really autobiographical.
So this might be a good opportunity to for you to describe how you assemble a cartoon such as this, which you've compared drawing a cartoon to producing a play. Can you talk us through the process a little bit?
Oh, well, I mean, first, it's really more the casting, and once I get an idea, which is not like a play per se, but then it becomes stage managing it in a funny way and directing it and producing it. But it's just setting the scene, figuring out where to unless it's very clear to me, the physical environment, the situation. Then once that's done, when that's sort of set, then how to the blocking out the action, having the relationships of that one line, what the reactions of everybody else would be to the speaker of the line, or in this case the main actor, and the wife's psychological state in gazing up at him, reacting to what the daughter is saying. I mean, it's a very domestic situation, and then how do you dress them? In the morning, it's in the evening. Should it be over wine? Should it be in coffee? I mean, how do you do it? New York apartment, window, anything out the window? Maybe not. A little scene of brownstones or not, and so on. All these decisions start building. I mean, and they're very instinctive. I mean, it's not as if there's a checklist like Atul Gawande has, for an operation. It's just back and forth as it develops. And
also, there's so much going on between the characters. I mean, it's like a really complex. They're all looking at each other.
Yeah.
With very definite points of view, and like they're like beaming rays at each other of emotion. You don't see that much in New Yorker cartoons. Although I guess like in the last century, cartoonists like Arno and stuff were more into stage scenes.
Yeah, and also in just exploring the dynamics, the interpersonal dynamics of a cartoon, and because that's so much part of it.
Yeah.
It's what makes it funny, and what makes it resonant, and what makes it, I hope, hit home. But there seems to be an absence of eyes, of eye contact, of interaction lately. But we won't go into that.
Well, it's unusual to see more than two characters in a cartoon anymore.
Yeah.
It's usually two characters, and one of them is delivering a punchline of some kind.
Mm-hmm. My parents decriminalized sugar.
That's a very Vermont.
No, well, it's not only Vermont. I mean, the diaspora, the middle class, the diaspora is everywhere. It's not. I used to be identified as the Upper West Side chronicler, but that's gone. The Upper West Side is now very changed, to be sure, and in terms of wealth and dynamics. But there's been a diaspora of people like me and you and everyone probably in this room around the country, so that you will find this. It's a New York City playground, but it could be in San Francisco. It could be, any number of kind of refugee cities for middle class, urban cosmopolitan folk, which is basically the audience for these cartoons.
But you have been involved. You're identified with two very distinct communities. Your early years in New York in the Upper West Side, and now your later years, I guess, in Vermont.
Yeah, I'm a Vermont woodchuck at this point. No, I'm not. Don't think for a minute I've mellowed. That's one very boring salmon. I mean, that reminds me of some people I know. And when somebody says, "Oh, the salmon was boring," I mean, it really was begging for some animation. Darling, let's get divorced.
I'm sort of like going ahead looking for some identifiably Vermont cartoons, although it's just so much fun just to watch these. So if you have anything to say, just feel free.
Okay, go ahead. Philip has said everything there is to say. Okay.
This isn't exactly Vermont. This could be
It could be
many
anywhere.
places, but
It's
this
a
is
summer.
this is
folk,
weekend.
they're on their terrace. I'm very fond of that kind of staging of.
yeah, and like
I've used it quite a bit. I mean, that kind of situation.
but it's so amazing. There's like 5 characters, and each of them has a identifiable personality.
Mm.
And you know, each of them is in the middle of some little action in this complex, relatively complex scene.
Well, you know, you have to wonder what led up to this moment and
Yeah,
what's going to happen afterwards. That's what, you know, Dorothy Parker has written wonderfully about Thurber, about the what did she say? I mean, I have to bring this
I
up
have that cartoon somewhere.
because it has to do with what this is all about. And Parker says of that Thurber deals in culminations. Beneath his pictures, he sets only the final line. He gives you a glimpse of the startling present and lets you go on to construct the astonishing past.
Wow,
And
great.
one can look at any cartoon in that way. I mean, this single panel New Yorker genre of cartoon. Are you just pissing and moaning, or you can verify what you're saying with data? This comes from my tussling with Vermont creationists and people who say, climate change. What are you talking about?
You have a lot of conversations like that up there?
I try. I not really. No, it's useless. In fact.
Yeah.
Well, I have one guy on the fire department who refuses to listen to a local meteorologist, weather forecaster on the radio. He said, he's a communist. He believes in climate change. I said, oh, sorry.
Oh, well, this is an amazing cover from a couple of years
Well, this comes from my life up there, which is lawnmower craziness. Huge lawns, guys on their mowers for hours at a time, mowing these vast tracts of green. And I was reminded of what Michael Pollan said about lawns. He said, the lawn is nature under totalitarian rule. So this kind of sprung from that.
Yeah, those hapless creatures gazing forlornly.
And the habitat loss is, let's not talk about that.
And you can't tell at least I can't tell if the guy in his lawnmower is a local or a visitor.
I don't know.
And it doesn't make any difference.
He's just a guy with his mower, his beloved mower.
He's mowing himself into a corner.
We're only here summers, but Roger likes to be taken for a local. So there is the confluence, the contretemps that goes on in rural communities near New York or not far from New York.
Did you ever want to be taken for a local?
I am.
Now you are one. Yeah.
Rufus here is the center of our life. Now, if you can think of a better way to do that, tell me.
Did this spring from people you know?
Sure. Anybody who owns pets is, no matter
pet
how
owners?
big or small, be they, beasts or birds or amphibians. That's what they think.
All right.
Two steaks, cruelly raised and brutally slaughtered. Enjoy.
You're very aware of food mores.
Oh yeah,
A
yeah.
lot of your recent work has
Yeah.
been
Excuse me, I've got to do
yeah.
something.
okay. Yes, at least it's not here. A lot of your recent work has been about like food
Yeah.
habits, food
Yeah, I mean, this
cultural, food politics.
Yeah, I mean, some decades ago, it was not a subject, but now
Mhm.
it's maybe the subject, or one of these subjects, and it's the foodie world just surrounds us, and particularly in the animal rights sense of organic and so on and so forth. What rhymes with failed marriage?
Oh, this was supposed to pop up. Well, this rhymes with another cartoon you were telling me about, the Sam Cobean.
No,
cartoon.
it was actually
Steig.
It was Steig and Adams both did cartoons very similar, in not in caption but in general sense of couples at cross purposes with each other.
We'll get to that a little later when we look at some older New Yorker cartoons. Screen culture. Is screen culture a concern of yours?
Not at all. No, I mean,
Okay.
what I tried to show on that screen was something as the guy's watching Jeopardy or something equally as challenging, intellectually challenging, and she is clearly not pleased. Your father and I want to explain why we've decided to live apart. And I think what motivated that was the phrase "living apart." We've decided to live apart. Somebody said that once, and I've thought how clinical,
Yeah.
and how unemotional it was, and what were the consequences of something so anodyne as that phrase. And I thought of this, and each one of those little offspring was going to be affected by this, and are. Their expressions are not one is the same, and they're all reacting, each in their own horrified way, to what their future is going to be like, and their world fallen apart with just that one phrase.
This is the saddest cartoon I've ever seen.
It is. I know.
Do you go through various iterations with something like this? Did this cartoon? I know you do rough drafts.
Oh yeah. I mean, it starts out with a rough pencil.
Uh-huh.
It starts out with a lot of with doodling, and the doodles start to merge into an idea, and the idea gets a little solidified with pencil, very roughly submitted with great hope, and oftentimes nothing happens, but in this case it was accepted. So then I went back and I tried to rethink it and refine it and just re-feel it altogether, and because there's lots to mull over in the course of doing a finished drawing. So I ended up with this. You taught me how to think.
Yeah,
I forgot about that one.
Where did this come from?
Yeah.
I find it even hard to imagine the backstory of that.
Well, I mean, just think of the cast of characters.
Anything more to say about it?
No, I mean,
Okay.
it's I mean, one must not interpret one's own work. It's for everybody else to make something of it.
Do you think New Yorkers are more neurotic than Vermontans are
Depends which. I mean,
as a class?
no, I don't think so. I mean, I think there's problems everywhere, and that's through all classes in different ways. So neurotic, and I don't even know what neurotic would mean.
Unfortunately, we have an
We have.
expert
I
here.
know.
You can define the terminology later. You wanted to talk about some of
Thurber.
the cartoonists who who influenced you the most, and the first one you mentioned was Thurber.
Yeah, Thurber, James Thurber was. I mean, he not the first, but one of many. And I've got lots of cartoonists in my past study that I've really enjoyed and drawn from, literally and figuratively. And just their. I mean, the body language of Thurber. I mean, his line quality is entirely different from mine, but the animation and the kind of almost choreography, balletic aspect of. I mean, look at that guy on the right and the witness.
Yeah.
I mean, look at how he's hunched over and is poised and tense. And, he's managed in all his ineptitude to produce a masterpiece. He never thought he could draw, and even though he's a kind of natural, untutored draftsman, a brilliant draftsman, and he once was caught by E.B. White, his office mate, at the New Yorker, cross-hatching to try to make his drawings better. And then White said to him, "Whatever are you doing? Stop that. If you got any better, you'd be mediocre." So it's perfect. All right, have it your way. You heard a seal bark. I mean, these are classic Thurber cartoons. I mean, it's... All right, try it that way. Go ahead and try it that way. I mean, speaking of relationships, comment on a relationship there. But look at her posture, her body movement. It's just wonderful. And Daumier.
Oh, okay, wait, okay.
Well, that's one of Daumier's political cartoons.
One image I forgot to download was your response to the Charlie Hebdo massacre.
Oh, yeah.
Which you adapted from Daumier, right?
Well, there was a famous and celebrated lithograph he did for this very journal of in Paris in the 1830s. It started in the 1830s, but it continued on late into the 19th century, and it was in 1848, he did a lithograph responding to a massacre in Paris during one of the rebellions of one of the many rebellions of 1848, and where the army shot an innocent family. They invaded their apartment and massacred all within. And he did a celebrated lithograph of the victims, and I kind of adapted that in my response to what happened in January in Paris.
I see you. I don't know if you see yourself, but I definitely see you in the tradition of social satirists that extends back to William Hogarth and Thomas Rowlandson in the 18th century, and Daumier and Gustave Doré and Granville in the 19th century. Can you give a little précis of how you see the satirical cartooning tradition progressing from that up through the New Yorker?
Well, the New Yorker is not in that political mode at all, and but it's much more like Daumier in his more social comments. I mean, this is very different, in France it's continued. Needless to say, I mean, Charlie Hebdo is very much part of that tradition. In this country, the editorial cartoonists have carried that on here, the political cartoonists. But not, I mean, what the New Yorker attempts to do, its ambition and why it's such a unique form of satire is that it addresses itself mostly to social issues and social concerns, society at a much larger, less political consideration that way.
With occasional forays into political cartoon.
Well, yeah, occasionally.
But yes, it's mostly social. In many ways, it seems like comedy is once again replacing journalism as like with the Daily
The
Show
Daily,
and,
yeah,
and
yeah.
late night comedy as a means for people to get political information. And back in the 18th and 19th century, the politicians were truly afraid of people like Daumier.
Well, yeah.
And Thomas Nast,
Thomas
of
Nast,
course.
that's right.
was-
Boss Tweed's famous
Yeah.
comment.
Yeah.
That damned cartoonist.
Yeah. Get rid of the cartoonists.
Yeah, yeah.
How have you ever like felt that you've gone too far in a cartoon, or not far enough in a cartoon?
Mostly not far enough. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
been too nice, frankly. But it's against my nature to be nasty and mean spirited. So it's a definite handicap.
I don't think so, but now I mean, do you have a secret stash of like really mean cartoons somewhere that you don't show people that you draw just for yourself?
Not really. No, I don't think so. I mean, they're all part and parcel of who I am. And
Okay. I figured out it. Let's see what else. Okay. Let's
Adams.
talk about
Yeah,
some
yeah,
older
yeah.
cartoons.
what is it?
Uh,
I'm sorry,
sorry.
Sonny, we've run out of candy. I don't know if you can see that, but it's a great Adams moment.
It's like a Martian.
And Martians have landed, and those are little Martians at the door, and it's clearly Halloween. Like Orson Welles' War of the Worlds come to life there, and but this theatrical setting of it and the storytelling is just brilliant, from that illuminated doorway on the left to everything, just taking it all in bit by bit and making it very funny when you finally get it.
But there's a very good chance that Mr. Adams did not come up with this idea
He
himself.
may well have.
He might have, but
Yeah,
he may not have.
He might not have either. It's true.
He might not.
I mean, that tradition is gone, but it
But-
was very much in force when he was
True.
drawing.
Which leads me to ask, have you ever taken a gag? Have you ever used a gag that was not your own? Or have you ever sold a gag to anyone else?
I've taken a few from friends, and I think we've had one.
Really?
Maybe. I mean, I think so. One, after hundreds of tries.
Calvin
Calvin
Trillin
one
is
of
at the house.
my collaborators.
I didn't know I was giving you I think I was just talking and you snatched it out of my conversation.
What was
I
it?
did.
What was it?
I can't remember.
Do you remember?
I had been doing a story. I've been doing a story in Charleston, which has that beautiful sort of thumb-shaped corner of it with all these gorgeously restored houses. And I got lost, as often happened then, and I came upon what I thought was a pile of bricks, and there was a little sign on it saying, "Another historic Charleston house awaiting restoration." And we were in a group of people, and Ed suddenly held his finger up and went to the office and started drawing. But the ones that I've actually tried to get him to use, we've been totally unsuccessful.
Well, keep trying. In some
We
way.
do.
Yes.
That's sort of like the what rhymes with failed marriage. That the cartoon
Exactly.
of mine.
Yeah.
But I didn't
perfectly.
But I wasn't. I came upon this after I did that. Strange to say, and I said, "Wow, there's something very similar, both in intent and in composition, to this." And just separating the two,
Perhaps
having
you'd seen
two
it before.
spaces.
And it just kind of seeped in and unconsciously.
Well, it's clearly an idea that is not far from the common core.
But the idea of surveillance cameras,
And that, but
that's pretty.
well.
like
That was before CCTV became really
Yeah.
part of our life. But couples and living this entente cordiale, almost like that. She's a doormat with teeth.
Oh, another teeth.
Yeah.
Drawing.
another great, Adams, which is very similar to the one he did with the Martians. He said, Maynard, I do think this once you should come out and look at the moon. But what's the operative there is this once.
Yeah. Oh,
That's the other one. That's
Yeah.
the Steig. But the expressions, make it work. And without expressions, it would be, just a gag. But this is a whole story.
It is, but when I first saw it, I thought, oh, the joke is that he's sawing the raft in half and they're both going to drown. But then if you look closely, they will just be separate. They will not drown. They will be separate and alive.
Well, maybe not. I mean, it's hard. That's part of the conundrum, part of the question in the whole thing.
Granville.
That's a Granville, one of my early mentors, so to speak, but using animals
Yeah.
as surrogates for us. Granville lived in the early 19th century, late 18th, early 19th, and worked probably into the 1840s and died way too young. But he was an illustrator rather than a cartoonist, and he did many, many books. And what is the King of the Penguins? This is called. So you can. I'm not quite sure what that means, but I mean what it refers to.
It's, as you said, I think as you told me once, a lot of these are just
They're
lost to the ages in
They are
terms
that,
of what
yeah.
they refer to.
But the drawing is remarkable. More of his, what is it? What is this? I can't read that, but it's at any rate one of those swimming pools that Paris had in the Seine, I think. And there is Daumier, the great Daumier, sort of caricaturing Nadar, who was very much active at the time. And you see all over these buildings, photographs, photographer. And he says, and what it says is Nadar raising photography to a high art.
Yeah, I know.
So
He was
fun, but,
he was skeptical.
Yeah,
Oh, and a good time. Yeah.
more Granville. And Glias Williams, the great storyteller in single panel, uncaptioned drawings. It says the inner man, buffet supper. That's all it says. And you can read it with great relish and detail. But each one of these people have a story in themselves. The great George Price, who is a draftsman, my idea of the great draftsman of all time of New Yorker time.
Mm-hmm.
I heard a bit of good news today. We shall pass this way but once. I mean, given time, we could go into that, but we don't have the time.
Yeah,
so we'll
there's
just
there's a lot
we'll
going
pass
on.
over it but once. Another prize. Watch out, Fred. Here it comes again. But the storytelling, the animation, the fact that he made a plant that moves, that has a kind of, it's almost anthropomorphized, branch coming around the corner. It's great. And of course, the great, kind of doodler of all time, the writer of drawings, as someone said, Steinberg.
Were you friends? Were you friends with Steinberg?
I wouldn't say friends, but I did know him. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we were friendly.
What other cartoonists did you hang out with when you lived in New York?
Well, him, mostly. We had there was a lunch meeting every Tuesday, and then another one on Wednesday, and the cartoonists would come to the New Yorker to see the then cartoon editor, James Garrity, who more or less held court over his lunches. And that's when I met all the people I admire. And I was a kid. I was this tad. And they were very encouraging. It was extremely collegial. And so that was the main social event when I got to know many of the people on the screen.
Mm-hmm. Yes, apparently that culture still sort of exists. There's like a open call for cartoonists on a weekly basis now.
Yeah, Tuesday, people show up.
I once sort of like half-assedly figured out that the New Yorker accepts something like 3%, maybe,
Something
of all
or less.
cartoons that are submitted to it each week.
Yeah,
Those are pretty long odds. And even with that, most cartoonists, submit 8 to 12 images each week to Bob Mankoff and David Rebnick. You probably always had a higher batting average than usual, but even that is like not
no,
that high. How do you deal with all that rejection?
depression. No, I do get alternately depressed and uncaring, and just resigned to lack of vision. I guess it varies from week to week, but I don't like it for sure if it's that way.
That would make a great T-shirt. Alternately depressed and resigned.
Yeah.
Yes.
Perhaps you could illustrate it.
Okay, that's the iconic Thurber. That's my first wife up there, and this is the present Mrs. Harris. And if we had time, we're probably running out of it. But there's a wonderful introduction by Dorothy Parker to the a book called Men, Women, and Dogs, which of Thurber's drawings, and she singles out this cartoon as a way of looking at cartoons, observing them, paying attention, and spending time just figuring out what is going on and what went on before and what's going to go on after. More price. I'm putting all my money into Things, which really was his life too. Roz Chast, the great Roz, and this, of course, at my age, I find an iconic cartoon and one of Roz's best. Reading the obituary page and figuring out where you are in relation to the recently deceased in terms of age. I don't know if you can read it, but it's and it ends up with your age on the dot. It's wonderful.
Oh, is that the last one?
And it is indeed the obituary
It's
page.
the end.
The last one.
So maybe this is a good time to open it up to whatever. Yeah.
Thanks so much, fellas. Yes, please. Great conversation, and it's really lovely to get your insights, and it's also just a real pleasure to spend some time with these images that are, we often move through with a pretty quick pace. You you look at it, you get it, but to really dwell.
These are like appetizers, it's not the meal. You could spend time with them.
And this is the question I want to ask you. I love this phrase, the astonishing present and the astonishing past. And I wonder how, what kind of past and future these characters have in your cartoons. Are you really focused on the moment, or are they moving through time? And do they exist in your mind the way characters in a novel might exist in a novelist's mind, or do they have names and images and history for you?
No. No. I mean, they really are in the moment, and they're. I think that way. I think if I thought sequentially, then I would be doing sequential work. That is, comic strips or graphic novels, but I don't. I can't actually do that. I've tried it, and
You did one though that was pretty good.
a long time ago.
What can you talk about that?
The SuperCon, I did it for Victor Navasky, the great Victor Navasky, the publisher and former editor of The Nation, who did something called the Outsiders newsletter in the 1960s. And he asked me to do a cartoon strip on Herman Kahn. I don't know if you remember Herman Kahn, the nuclear strategist who wrote a book called Thinking of the Unthinkable? The Unthinkable, which is basically nuclear war. And he was the director and founder of the Hudson Institute and was a kind of hawk, a very right-wing guy, and we went after him. Victor asked me if I would do it, so I did this. But I never was pleased with it. I never found it as satisfying as something like that.
So, let me start by saying that I'm somewhat of a Philistine when it comes to New Yorker cartoons. Compared to most of my friends, I don't often look at New Yorker cartoons. I use the occasional one. I'm a psychotherapist and a psychoanalyst. When I give talks, I often look for cartoons that have something to do with psychotherapy or psychoanalysis. So this has been a real education for me. And in preparation for this, I've gone through a number of interviews that you've done with other people, including your interview with Richard. And, this has really sort of helped me, I think, to sort of grasp, in a way which I never did before, some of what it is you're doing. And so I just want to pick up on some things that I've read you as having said in previous interviews and ask you to expand on them. And one of them is that in, I think, a previous interview, I'm not sure it was with, you characterized yourself as a social historian in kind of a funny way. There's another way in which you think of yourself as sort of an anthropologist, right? And I wonder if you can just sort of comment a little bit on that stance and how it's relevant to what you see yourself as doing.
Well, it's all to the extent that social scientists are observers. I'm sort of an observer without the science. I mean, it's very amateurish, but I like to think that the best of any artist, writer, poet is a noticer, and just pays attention to what seems to be what's going on, and I do it with a peculiar frame of mind. I mean, it's a funny way. People have always asked me, where do you get your ideas? And no one asks that of poets or novelists or nonfiction writers. But somehow cartoonists are the ones where this is the most puzzling phenomenon. I mean, or art form. Like, you would never ask a novelist that question, or a short story writer. But that said, I think all of us, and I say us broadly, are doing the same thing, that we're noticing certain phenomena in our environment, in our life. And I'm really intrigued by the way how people live and what they look like and how they, the pathologies, in a way, the social changes, the trends, all of that. Somehow, my curiosity. That was a Hugh Trevor Roper said, he said, the problem is I'm interested in too many things. And I said, yes, that's true. I'm interested in everything. And somehow it all creeps into my work in some way that I can't really describe. As E.B. White said, I write by ear, and then he said something else, but I don't really know what's going on under the hood. I really don't. It just coalesces.
Okay, so let me just follow up with another comment, which is my observation about your cartoons and something I've seen others say in interviews with you is that there's something about your cartoons, they are in this satirical tradition, but they don't seem to be mean-spirited, right? There's a kind of gentleness about them in which you're kind of, sort of ribbing, sort of people or a certain kind of social milieu, right? But there's also a certain kind of gentleness about it as well, and that strikes me as being something very sort of characteristic of your sense of aesthetics or your own particular idiom, and I wonder if you can comment on that.
Well, I guess it came up earlier about mean-spiritedness and being nasty and being, like the French tradition of really, kicking people, politically, not socially, but politically. and I'm not like that. I mean, it's just it's so endemic to the way. I mean, these are expressions of what I am, who I am, what I think, how I go about observing. I mean, it's not that I'm not angry or not mean-spirited, because I am, but as well. But I don't live life that way. And if I'm always. Sometimes my wife chides me on being a little too harsh on people, and a little too removed and remote about, clinical almost. And but at heart, I'm not. But I can be the other way as well. And this is an amalgamation. It's a stew of that I can't unravel. I mean, I should probably, become mindful, or go visit you clinically to try to sort it out. But I can't. And I find if I did, it would probably defang me. I'd be without. I'd be a gumless, toothless satirist.
What did you have an opinion of? Were you a fan of Charlie Hebdo?
Not
Were
really.
you
I mean,
familiar with
I mean, I knew.
And what did you think about the type of cartooning?
Well, I mean, I met a few of them. For that situation in France, they were perfect because of the politicization and the extreme politicization of their society. And at heart they were funny, and at heart they were, in spite of the presumed nastiness and provocativeness of their drawings, they were liberal, lefty sorts who really wanted a better world. I mean, they were on the side that I'm on as well, but they expressed it differently, and I, was just heartbroken by what happened to people similar but not the same as I.
And one more sort of follow-up question statement, and then I'll turn it over to the audience. But the other thing I've been struck by in hearing you talk and in reading some of your interviews is just the incredible amount of work and detail, that goes into actually creating a cartoon for you, aside from the initial inspiration, sort of arranging the props and all the particular details, what will be there, what there won't, et cetera, et cetera. It's incredibly complex. And all that is to have, sort of an impact that people just sort of absorb in 1 second, either get it or not.
Yeah.
And whether you can say anything about the relationship between what goes into it and what comes out of it.
Well, I mean, it is discouraging sometimes to be on a subway or a public conveyance, and somebody's looking at the New Yorker, and I know there's a cartoon in that issue of mine, and I watch people as they, I always read for cartoons. That's what they're doing. They're leafing through the paper, the magazine, and the amount of time spent with each drawing is minute.
Yeah.
It's a handful of seconds, and it's. I know they're coming up to where mine is because I know the issue, and flip, look at mine, flip, Ooh. But you know what? It doesn't bother me because I have had such great pleasure doing it and such delight. And I know someone's going to spend some time with it and try to think about it and maybe make something of it.
Yeah. Other questions in the audience?
I'm a psychoanalyst as well, and that means I'm in the profession of talking about it,
Yeah.
which of course fits in with this. And I'd like to thank you for a cartoon that wasn't shown here, but as I flipped by one time in the New Yorker, there was a mother and her child on the sidewalk, and the child was crying, totally upset because his ice cream had fallen out of his cone and was there plopped on the ground.
Yeah.
And his mother's leaning over and says, "Would you like to talk about it?" And I thought that was brilliant. Brilliant for, first of all, highlighting the things that are talked about and that aren't. You used the word a little earlier about being defanged, or E.B. White, I don't know what's under the hood. Well, what's under the hood is very big and very furry and has fangs.
Yeah. yeah.
And so it's that side of things that I think you highlight so well, which in effect is talking about how it is we can be civilized, and that's where the gentleness comes in, and the sense of the balance between what doesn't get paid attention to, but we know it's there to be talked about too.
Yeah, and I guess the question is, what will talk really, kind of solve,
Right.
deal with the dilemma that faces us all the time.
Right. So
Which
it's
faces
does
you
talk
and your
avoid,
patients.
or does talk can actually talk lead to it, and that would be the difference.
Yeah, yeah.
Another reading of it is that it's hostile, that the hosts are smiling and happy with it, the guests are terrified and worried, and the hosts are saying, "Don't worry about it." It's like you're visiting someone with a vicious dog
Yeah,
that's snarling at you, and the hosts are saying, "Oh, it's a friendly dog."
well, that's interesting. I mean, I thought of it that they've come to terms with something basically irreconcilable. I mean, you can't deal with it, but by talking, I mean, it's just so dominant and perhaps evil, or kind of a burden that will never go away. But by talking about it, you kind of defang it a little bit, make it less what it is really. I mean, it's like people grieving. I mean, they will talk about something that just won't go away, and you could think of it that way.
I don't know if you kind of implied this earlier, but I wasn't clear how you create these cartoons in the sense of the caption first versus the drawing. Maybe you implied it, but if you could talk a little bit about if you start with the idea and the idea is the caption, or you start with the idea and the idea is the cartoon.
Well, actually, Peter Arno had addressed this issue in one of the introductions to one of his books, and he said, in answer to that question, which comes first, the idea or the drawing, and he said both. The idea comes, and it's hard to sort it out. I take notes of what people say, and I also have a sketchbook, and I take notes of what people do or look like, and I just mull through them, and they congeal somehow in the course of just mulling, sketching, drawing, doodling, and it's magical. I mean, I'm not quite sure how. And one thing will lead to another, and as you doodle something. I mean, I'm sure this is true. We have my two colleagues from the New Yorker are here, Harry Bliss and Liza Donnelly, and they probably have very similar ways in which we all work. It's not magical. I mean, it's not unique, but it is magical.
Other questions?
Just following up on what we were talking about what's under the hood. I mean, the other thing that I think that makes people love your work so much is that you call us out on our little hypocrisies, our little smugnesses, our small-mindedness, and I think that you said something that really hit on the nose before, too, the limits of what we say to ourselves, but in a loving way.
Yeah. That's, I mean, the opposite would be pointless. I mean, were I to be cruel about it, and which I could be, I guess, and but I don't feel that. And there's no point to it. And but it's I get exercised by dumbness and dingbattedness and silliness and vanity. And I mean, I was walking through the meatpacking district today on my way here, and I was just stunned by Vanity Fair. There is just astonishing how the city is transforming itself in that direction to a kind of it's kind of Narcissville, almost. So, I mean, these are social trends. I could inveigh against it, and I'd become very tedious if I did it. But that's the point. I don't want to hope not to be tedious by doing the same thing.
So my question is, I think it's interesting in this particular cartoon that we have a saying called the elephant in the room. that you have a monster in the room.
Yeah.
And I'd like to, your monsters are all gentle, gentle monsters. Like, do we want to cuddle with him? You know, I mean, obviously, when E.T. came out, everybody thought that was wonderful. But I'm just curious about your inner child, because you have a wonderful. I'm so happy to see your face. It's so nice, you know, in the cartoons. We don't know what you look like, cartoonist. So
Grumpy.
yeah. But I am really curious about your relationship to children and this other fantasy life, not just as as an adult, but in your own life, you know, moving to the country and all that stuff. Thank you.
Well, I have three kids. I mean, I have a summer crop when I was younger, and a winter crop now when I was an older guy. So I have a young son who's 26, and my other kids are closing in on 50. So, and I was never at the beginning somebody who wanted kids, but once I did, voila. I mean, I became very, very devoted, and I'm not like Steig, who thought of himself as unable to leave his childhood and that aspect of the expressiveness of childhood. I mean, I'm fascinated by kids, and by their, as he was, by their innocence and by how we corrupt it and how they're, funny, on the driving down today, I heard a fascinating piece on a call-in show that is hosted by a man named Tom Ashbrook called On Point. And what was stunning, now that you bring up children, is that he was interviewing a man who wrote a book about children and nature now, and how children are being brought up isolated from the natural world. And the statistic he quoted from research that was been done on this is that the average American kid spends 4 to 7 minutes a day out of doors and 7 hours in front of a screen. So, I mean, and as a lover, I mean, just hoping to see kids develop in their most wonderful ways, I was appalled. So, voila. That's what I'm...
We'll take one more question, and I want to leave some time for signing books afterwards. We'll wrap up with this.
Thank you. Following up on what she said, I was struck by how much your cartoons share with a good interpretation, in the sense that you call us up on something that it's important for us, but you don't take us too far, so we cannot tolerate it. So, I think there's a really nice link there.
Well, I'm not an ideologue, so that's hopefully, I have no political party to satisfy.
Gentlemen, thank you so much. Richard, thanks for writing a great book.
Thank you.
Thanks for your brilliant work.